Let's venture deeper into muscle tissue, specifically skeletal muscles. Let's learn more details about how their anatomy and how a muscle contracts. Recall that the cell membrane of a muscle has a new name, a different name, called the sarcolemma. It's this layer wrapped around the outside here. Well, so that means that everything inside the sarcolemma is part of the muscle cell. This is the inside of a muscle cell. And each one of these units here is called a myofibril. Here's another myofibril. This layer here on the outside, underneath the sarcolemma and surrounding the myofibrils, is called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And what it does is it helps bring calcium into the myofibrils for contraction. These little tubes here are called the transverse tubule system. And they're responsible for bringing other ions in, such as sodium. Let's take a closer look. Inside the myofibrils, there are these filaments, these long, skinny filaments, and they have a name. So they are called actin and myosin. This, what I'm about to trace, what I'm about to draw here, is a filament of actin right along here. Let me get a thicker pen. These are strands of actin. These others, the thicker ones, are called myosin. Myosin. Myo means muscle. And these little bits in between are called cross bridges. Now, let's show you over here. Here's the thick filament called myosin over here. myosin. Note the thin filament called actin. I'll make that in green. Okay. These filaments, so this is actin, and this is myosin. Watch how these two interact. How does a muscle contract? Here is the sarcomere. The sarcomere is the actin and myosin together. It's this little unit here that causes the contraction of a muscle on a microscopic level. This is a relaxed sarcomere. It's not contracted. This is what's going on inside your muscle cell. It's a model. It's a diagram. Obviously, it doesn't look exactly like this. But here's a muscle in the relaxed state. Here's the sarcomere in a relaxed state. Watch what happens when a muscle contracts. These cross bridges that are even right here, that are in sort of a neutral position, watch what they do. They slant inward like this, from straight to slanting inward. When they slant inward, you can see what happens. They bring the actin filaments in this direction. Look how this gap here from here to here has closed right here and became smaller. That's because these little cross bridges from the myosin grabbed the actin and pulled it in the inward direction. These are the cross bridges right here, sitting on top of myosin. Here's an expanded view. Here's the myosin filament. We'll call it purple myosin. A thick filament of myosin. Here is the thin filament of actin. Here. Watch, and this is a more detailed description of what happens. Watch what happens, and here's the cross bridge. Look how it comes off of actin and reaches in, and what it does is it pulls like a lever. The cross bridge comes off of myosin and pulls the actin backward in this direction, thereby contracting the muscle. So I know this page is very busy. It's got a lot going on, but these are the basics of muscle contraction that you need to know. Difficult to see on this drawing are the mitochondria. It's hard to tell where they are exactly in here. Maybe there's a mitochondria, but in between these myofibrils are mitochondria. And do you recall what mitochondria are responsible for? Well, the sarcomere needs energy to contract, particularly right here at the cross bridge, in order to pull this actin filament in this direction. Where does that energy come from? It comes from a molecule called ATP. We'll learn more about that later, but that ATP is manufactured in these mitochondria, in between the myofibrils. Now, how does this whole scenario here fit into this picture here? Just the basics. There's a lot of information here. The actin is the actin fibers, these fibers here and here. This is a drawing of that, of this. The actin fibers are these lighter colored fibers in the middle, or in between here. These are actin fibers here. And the darker shades are the myosin. So you can see how this is the myosin here. So all of this is happening, all of this is happening in these sections right here. and inside here. And you can see, if you were to slice this in half like so and look at it from this end, you would see this, which would look like this. You can see the thin actin fibers here and here. And you could see in this cross-sectional view the myosin fibers, which are thicker. And what would you guess these are right here? Correct. Cross bridges. Can you see how these cross bridges will reach out to this filament of actin right here, grab it and pull on it to cause muscle contraction? Hopefully by now you can see. And of course, this has been a diagram taken. Here's a myofibril right here. A myofibril is one of these here. Yeah. Taken from a muscle cell, which is this right here, this whole structure. Right? This is a muscle cell with mitochondria, myofibrils. Inside the myofibrils, units of sarcomeres, which are exploded and expanded in this view here and here. Sarcomere is the unit, it's the actin and the myosin acting together to cause contraction. So let's review some of our terms. Here's your myofibril. You know that is one of these units here. The sarcomere is one of the units inside the myofibril. It's the actin and the myosin working together to cause contraction. Here's your actin and myosin. You know that actin is that thin filament. The thick filament is myosin. And of course, our cross bridge, the ever important cross bridge down here that reaches out from the myosin and grabs the actin and pulls on it to cause contraction. The sarcolemma, of course. The wrapping around, it's the cell membrane of a muscle. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, in review, which stores the calcium for the muscle contraction. The transverse tubule system, which brings the calcium and sodium in. And the mitochondrion in between the myofibrils to provide energy. ATP. Now, let's find these words in the text. Sarcolemma, myofibrils, transverse tubule system. See, sodium and calcium ions. The filaments of myosin, we know that's the thick one, right? And the thin is called actin. The sarcomere is that unit of actin and myosin that contracts. Sliding motion of the cross bridges. The thick filaments of myosin, how they're talking about the cross bridges, the heads of the cross bridges connect to the thin filaments. Oh, look, ATP, the cross bridges swing in concert, like rowing, like a rowboat. Drawing the thin filaments in with them. The sarcomere shortens. This represents the end of page 12 of Anatomy coloring book. I'm Dr. Harkins. Until next time.